In a way, it's nice to know that there are Greek gods out there, because you have somebody to blame when things go wrong. I'm Jan, welcome to my chan, and we are here to discuss the events of the Titan's Curse, Book 3 in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. It's been 6 months since Percy's last quest, 6 months since Thalia was brought back, and now a new danger presents itself as our heroes are called to aid Grover as he has discovered two powerful half-bloods. Percy Jackson, Annabeth Chase, and Thalia Grace are being driven to Bar Harbor, Maine by Sally Jackson. She drops them off at a boarding school, Westover Hall. She had embarrassed Percy the whole way by telling stories about his childhood to the girls. The kids enter the school and immediately run into adults, Vice Principal Dr. Thorne and Miss Gottschalk. Thalia is able to manipulate the myths to trick the teachers into thinking they already attend. Percy gets a bit jealous because Chiron never taught him that. Grover shows up, telling the trio that he found two demigods. Percy mentions Chiron has the satyrs working overtime to recruit more half-bloods. Grover looks to Thalia for leadership, which rubs Percy the wrong way because he misses when Grover looked to him for guidance. Grover also tells them that the monster on campus is close to uncovering the identities of the new demigods. He says they just met the monster. It's Dr. Thorne, the vice principal. They head down the hall to where a school dance is being held. Grover shows them Bianca and Nico D'Angelo, siblings. To blend in, Thalia takes Grover to dance with, and Percy and Annabeth dance together. When Annabeth mentions that her dad took a job in San Francisco, Percy is confused, but Annabeth says half-bloods can't stay in San Francisco because it is right there.
What's that supposed to mean?
But then she notices Nico and Bianca are gone, and so is Dr. Thorne. Annabeth goes to find Thalia and Grover, but when Percy goes to follow, he gets turned around and loses her in the crowd. He decides to go out and follow Dr. Thorne himself. In the halls, he can't find Thorne, but he does find the D'Angelo siblings, frozen in fear. Too late, Percy realizes the threat is behind him when a projectile flies at him and impales his shoulder to the wall. Percy feels poison coming from the projectile. Dr. Thorne reveals himself, still in human form, and orders the demigods to follow him. As the monster walks the kids outside, Percy tries tapping into his empathy link with Grover and sending a distress signal. Thorne leads them to a cliff edge over the Atlantic and calls for an extraction. He tells Percy that the general is eager to meet him.
Who?
A helicopter approaches them as Thorne goes on about how the Great Stirring is underway, whatever that means. Annabeth approaches from behind with her invisibility cap and tackles the D'Angelos and Percy out of the way, startling Thorne and causing him to miss. This gives Thalia and Grover the chance to attack. Thalia carries a spear in her shield, Aegis. She engages Thorne in battle, and he reveals his true form. He's a manticore, a beast with a tail like a scorpion. Percy activates his wristwatch shield and joins in the fight. It's no use as Thorne is too strong. But then out of the woods comes the hunters, girls in silver coats shooting arrows at Thorne. Annabeth jumps on the manticore's back and stabs it with his knife, and as the hunters launch a volley of arrows, Thorne jumps over the cliff edge. Percy tries to go after her, but is stopped by the helicopter shooting at the young heroes and hunters, causing them to flee. You can tell this book was written in a different time when gun violence was not as serious of an issue as it is now, because you have a helicopter shooting bullets at a crowd of children. All of them flee except for a young girl who says no mortals can witness her hunt, and then she turns the helicopter into a flock of ravens. In the quiet, the hunters approach. A girl named Zoe Nightshade recognizes Thalia. Apparently, they do not get along. The hunters hold Percy down as he tries to get up to go after Annabeth. When he demands to know who the young girl leading them is, she introduces herself as Artemis, goddess of the hunt.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. Now come on now.
Artemis explains how Annabeth has vanished, and Percy realizes she is right because if she had fallen into the sea, he could have sensed her. Bianca interrupts to demand to know what is going on. Artemis and Zoe explain how they are demigods and the Greek gods still exist. Her and Nico realize this explains the strange events in their lives, like the man who tried attacking them in DC last time. When Percy says the siblings need to train at Camp Half-Blood, Zoe mentions there is another option, but Thalia tells her no there isn't. Artemis orders her hunters to make camp as she talks to Bianca. Thalia and Percy get into an argument because Thalia feels Percy fumbled the situation. Then, Percy finds Annabeth's Yankee cap in the snow as the daughter of Zeus walks away. As they're sitting around the campfire, Grover tends to Percy's wounded shoulder. Nico mentions his love of the card game Mythomagic and says he's been playing it for a year but can't remember before that.
Curiouser and curiouser.
Basically, Mythomagic is like a Yu-Gi-Oh game, but it involves figurines, so it's kind of like Magic the Gathering, I guess, but I've never played that, so I don't know. Artemis speaks to Percy, who recounts what happened and how Dr. Thorne mentions something about the most dangerous monster of all. Artemis says she has seen a rise in old monsters that she hasn't seen in millennia. She says she will go hunt it alone and asks Percy to escort her hunters to camp for their safety. Then she asks Bianca if she made a decision yet. You see, she's offered Bianca a chance to join the Hunters of Artemis. Most demigods only have Camp Half-Blood as an option, but girls, mortals, nature spirits, demigods, have the option to join the hunt. When they join, as long as they do not break their oath, the hunters remain immortal, which I think is a little unfair. What about the boys? What about non-binary demigods? Anyway, Bianca agrees to join, and when her brother finds out, he feels a bit betrayed, which, like, I get that. I can't imagine leaving my younger sibling behind like that. But I also sympathize with how she feels she had to raise Nico most of their lives, and this is the first chance she gets where she's not bound by responsibility. Artemis has her brother pick up the children to take them to camp. Apollo shows up in his sun chariot, which resembles a fancy car. Thalia comments that she thinks he's hot, to which Percy responds, well, yeah, he's the sun god. Oh, Percy. So oblivious to the idea that anyone can like boys. Apollo turns the sun chariot into a school bus, and Artemis leaves. Once on board, Apollo asks around who wants to drive and settles on Thalia. She isn't sure how old she is. She was turned into a tree at 12, but aged slowly while in tree form. Apollo, god of prophecy and all that, says she is 15 going on 16 when her birthday passes next week. He presses her until she caves and drives the sun bus. She nearly burns up several towns in New England before crash landing in the canoe lake at Camp Half-Blood.
We did it! We did it! We did it! Yay!
Immediately, the hunters split off to go to Cabin 8 for Artemis. Apollo leaves, telling Percy to watch those prophecies, whatever that means. Percy and Thalia take Nico to meet Chiron. Percy is shocked by the sight of the camp in winter. In the big house, when they tell Chiron and Mr. D that Annabeth is gone, Mr. D mentions not another one, implying other Half-Bloods have gone missing since summer ended. Grover takes Nico to see the camp orientation film as Thalia and Percy recount what happened. When they ask to go on a quest to save Annabeth, Mr. D denies them, saying they were lucky to bring back Nico and shouldn't risk further loss just to save one Half-Blood. The gods can be really cruel. Did I mention that? Percy snaps at Mr. D for being so callous, but is interrupted by Nico coming back, excited at what he's learned about the Greek gods and Western civilization. Chiron announces that they'll play Capture the Flag tomorrow evening. It's a tradition whenever the hunters visit. Thalia and Percy leave the big house, agreeing to co-captain for Capture the Flag. Thalia tells Percy about how she learned her mother died in a car accident while she was gone. Her mother was an alcoholic, and Percy figures that's why she had a tough time driving the sun chariot.
You sure about that?
Percy goes to each cabin to tell them about the game tomorrow, and when he gets to the Ares cabin, he asks about Clarice. One of her siblings says she is out on a top secret mission. When he gets to his cabin, he notices a new water fountain in it, a gift from Poseidon. Percy uses it to send an iris message to Tyson. Tyson tells him about how busy Poseidon is dealing with the old sea spirits like Oceanus. He also mentions that they're protecting the Princess Andromeda from Poseidon, but not to worry because it's sailing through the Panama Canal away from the eastern shore. That night he has a nightmare about Annabeth on a hillside, shrouded in fog, climbing through ruins. She finds Luke and takes the burden he is carrying, some kind of huge ceiling. He tells her she is part of the plan and to try not to die. The next morning, Percy tells Grover his dreams. Grover lets it slip that he overheard that Zoe had a similar nightmare that drove her to seek out Chiron in the middle of the night. Argus didn't let her into the big house because it was past curfew, but Chiron did come outside. Zoe wanted to leave camp because she dreamt that Artemis was kidnapped, but Chiron refused. Then Grover mentions that he thinks the hunters were scouting them at Westover Hall and pulls out a pamphlet for the Hunters of Artemis. He says he found it in Annabeth's backpack and thinks that she might have been considering joining.
I was in pure shock.
Later that day, Percy sneaks into the big house when no one is there to seek out the oracle, but nothing happens. That night, it's Capture the Flag between the hunters and the campers. Thalia leads the offensive while Percy leads defense of the flag, but leaves when he sees a golden opportunity. He takes the hunter's flag and makes a break for it, but not before Zoe comes bounding past with the camper's flag, winning the game for the 56th time in a row for the Hunters of Artemis. Thalia and Percy get into an argument, which devolves into full-on fighting, with Thalia blasting Percy with lightning and Percy summoning a wave of water to wash over Thalia. The only thing that stops them is the appearance of the mummified oracle limping towards the crowd. She utters a prophecy for Zoe Nightshade. 5 shall go west to the goddess in chains. 1 shall be lost in the land without rain. The bane of Olympus shows the trail. Campers and hunters combined prevail. The Titans cursed must one withstand, and 1 shall perish by a parent's hand. Then the oracle sits down, unmoving once again. Grover and Percy are tasked with bringing the oracle back to the attic. Grover mentions that he wishes he was searching for Pan, and how he's let the trail go cold. Then Thalia comes up and tells Grover to tell Percy that Dionysus has called a meeting of the Council of Cabin Leaders to discuss the prophecy. In the meeting, they come to the conclusion that 2 campers and 3 hunters should go. Zoe, obviously, along with Phoebe, another huntress, and Bianca. The Stoll brothers give Zoe a t-shirt for Phoebe, who was particularly cruel to some of the campers.
That's suspicious.
Yeah, it's fine.
That's weird.
Also joining them will be Grover and Thalia. They have until the winter solstice on December 21st to find her, as her voice on the Council of the Gods is the only one in favor of taking action against Cronus. Percy wants to go, but Zoe refuses to travel with the boy. She says Grover isn't technically a boy, #trans icon Grover Underwood. Percy doesn't go to dinner that night, and Kieran and Grover show up at his cabin to check on him. Kieran speaks to him alone about how similar him and Thalia are, and that's why they butt heads so much. He also mentions that Zoe wouldn't like Percy coming along with Riptide.
I was scared of dentists and the dark.
He calls his mom with an iris message when Kieran leaves. She's having a study day with Paul Blowfist, another student that she goes to college with. When Percy tells her everything that's happened, she tells him that he should follow his heart and that she will support him no matter what.
She is the mother I never had.
That night, he dreams about Annabeth again, struggling to hold up that cavern ceiling. Luke and a stranger cloaked in shadows bring forth Artemis, who volunteers to take Annabeth's place.
I volunteer as tribute.
Percy is woken up by the arrival of Blackjack, the Pegasus he helped free from Luke aboard the Princess Andromeda last summer. Blackjack tells him that there is a marine emergency that needs his help. Aquaman would be proud. He grabs Annabeth's cap and has Blackjack fly him out onto Long Island Sound, where a monster with the front half of a cow, the back half of a serpent, is trapped under a sunken ship. Percy takes time calling the beast Bessie and is able to free her after some time. As Blackjack flies him back to camp, Percy spots Nico spying on the hunters. He's dropped off nearby and slips on Annabeth's invisibility cap. He overhears Zoe and Bianca talking about how Phoebe was given a poisoned t-shirt by the Stoll brothers. They decide to leave without her so she can rest, and without replacing her on the quest. Once they're gone, Percy reveals himself to Nico, who makes him promise to look after his sister Bianca and follow them on their quest. Percy relents and agrees to do his best. He gets back on Blackjack and follows the van, leaving camp by air. Percy follows them into Manhattan, thinking they're going to be dropped off at the bus terminal like always, but the van keeps driving. Blackjack tells him that Argus is not driving, but Zoe is. Percy lands atop the Chrysler building, and when he goes to leap off with Blackjack, he notices grapevines have entangled them. Mr. D shows up, first telling Percy why he doesn't like heroes, how his future wife, Ariadne, was abandoned by Theseus, another son of Poseidon, who failed to keep his promise. Heroes are just as bad as gods, and tells Percy to just ask Medea or Zoe Nightshade. Then he tells the young hero to go follow his friends. He follows the van all the way to a convenience store in Maryland, where they pull over. He puts on the invisibility cap and overhears them talking about Grover's tracking spell, leading them to Washington, D.C. next. Bianca mentions that her and her brother used to live there, but then forgets the details.
That's suspicious.
They leave again, arriving in D.C. later that day, with Percy not far behind. He has Blackjack drop him at the Washington Monument as the other heroes head toward the National Air and Space Museum. Percy spots Dr. Thorne on the premises as well. Percy follows Thorne with the invisibility cap as Thorne follows Zoe, Bianca, Thalia, and Grover. But Thorne makes a turn towards the National Museum of Natural History, and Percy decides to follow him.
Shit, here we go again.
He follows Thorne to a meeting with some monsters, Luke and the General, the man from Percy's dream. The General asks how many there are, and Luke responds 4 and lists off Grover, Thalia, Bianca, and Zoe. The General had a personal beef with Zoe for some reason. Then he says he sent something after them already. Their goal is to isolate Thalia to get a child of the Big Three onto their side. They plant some teeth, pour some blood, and grow baby saber-toothed beasts by mistake. The mortal guard is fired and someone else is sent to retrieve the right teeth, Tyrannosaurus Rex ones. They plant these teeth, with the General commenting how the mortals don't even know when they have Cyberus dragon teeth. From these, they grow inhuman soldiers. As the General calls for the scent to be given to them, Percy runs up and snatches the fabric from their hands. But one of the skeletal warriors snatches a piece off of it, passing it around to the other ones to have a sniff. Percy continues to run out the doors and towards the others to warn them.
Oh, why do I have to run every 8 minutes of my life?
In the Air and Space Museum, Percy fills in the other heroes on what he saw, just as the monster appears. It's the Nemean lion, and they have a hard time defeating it because of its impenetrable fur. Percy throws dehydrated space food into its mouth to get it to stay open long enough for the hunters to finish it off. As it disappears, all that is left behind is the lion's pelt, which turns into a duster coat. Zoe tells Percy to take it as it's a spoil of war. Then they all run back to the van as they spot the gray skeletal warriors coming after them. As they flee, the helicopter from before pursues them. Bianca gets the idea to take the subway to Alexandria. She mentions that it stood out to her last summer because it wasn't there when her and Nico were growing up. The others comment how the subway station had been there for a while, but their conversation is cut short by the helicopter getting closer. They change trains a few more times and wind up in an industrial rail yard sharing a fire with a homeless man. The man offers to help them find a ride west and points them to a car carrier train that reads Sun West Line. They try to thank him, but he vanishes.
That's suspicious.
On the ride, Percy has a talk with Thalia. They talk about how the Nemean lion wasn't the mystery monster that the General sent after her. She tells him why San Francisco is so dangerous. Why, I asked, what's so bad about San Francisco? The mist is really thick there because the Mountain of Despair is so near. Titan magic, what's left of it, still lingers. Monsters are attracted to the area like you wouldn't believe. What's the Mountain of Despair? Thalia raised an eyebrow. You really don't know? Ask stupid Zoe. She's the expert. Percy realizes the reason that she doesn't get along with Zoe and the Hunters is because they tried to recruit her years ago when she was traveling with Luke and Annabeth. She tells Percy he should figure out why Annabeth was curious about the Hunters. Percy joins a sleeping Grover in his car, where he runs into the homeless man from earlier. It's Apollo, he's incognito, helping them travel west. He tells Percy to seek out Nereus, the old man of the sea, who may know more. Then he snaps his fingers and puts Percy to sleep. Percy has a dream that he's somewhere else, traveling with a girl through a garden on a mountain. She tells him that Ladon is too dangerous and gives him a hairpin imbued with the power of the sea and her mother Pleione. She tells him the weapon's name is Anaklusmos, and then Percy wakes up. As they disembark the train, he realizes why the girl was familiar. It was Zoe Nightshade.
Curiouser and curiouser.
The gang arrives in Cloudcroft, New Mexico. They split up.
I think we should split up.
With Zoe and Grover getting coffee and pastries, while Thalia, Bianca, and Percy see about a ride out of town. Thalia is disappointed in learning there is no easy way out and decides to keep asking around. Bianca and Percy have a chat with Bianca telling him how her and Nico went to a school in D.C., how their parents are dead, and how a lawyer took them to stay in a hotel before another lawyer took them back to D.C. and then to Maine. Her memories of before then are a bit hazy.
That's weird.
The others return when a warm breeze blows past, causing the birds on Grover's cup to come to life, and then he passes out. The others carry him away from Main Street, but barely get to the edge of town before they're confronted by 4 skeletal warriors dressed like police. Grover mutters something about the gift of the wild being near. Percy gets shot trying to fight, but is saved by the Nemean lion fur. The others try fighting the warriors, but only Bianca is successful in destroying one of them, but she isn't sure how she did it. Then, out of the woods bursts a giant wild boar, the Erymanthean boar. It makes quick work of the three skeletal warriors before the others have to incapacitate it without hurting it, as it's the blessing from the wild, whatever that means. Percy and Thalia lead it onto a train track and over a gorge and trap it in a snowbank. They decide to ride it west, as Zoe explains that just for a moment you could sense the presence of the god of the wild, Pan. They ride the boar as far as Gilliclaw, Arizona, a ghost town. Grover does a tracking spell that reveals a nearby junkyard is their next challenge. They camp for the night, and the others come to the realization while talking with Bianca that her and Nico were in the Lotus Hotel and Casino, and that they had been there for 70 years. Before they can discuss it further, a limo appears out of nowhere. Ares comes out and tells Percy that someone wants to see him. That someone is Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who admits to having a hand in helping Percy go on this quest because of his love for Annabeth. She also wants Percy to follow his heart, like his mother did. She also wants to make sure his love life is complicated, and that's putting it mildly. She warns him not to take anything from her husband's stuff, i.e. the junkyard. Then Percy's audience with the goddess of love is over. Ares snaps his fingers, and the group is transported to the middle of the junkyard of the gods. They wander through it and make it to the other side before a giant mechanical automaton named Talos begins attacking them. Bianca took a statue of a god, a mythomagic figurine that Nico didn't have yet. Percy hatches an idea to climb up through a maintenance hatch in Talos' foot, but Bianca volunteers instead, saying it's her fault. Before Percy can stop her, she gives him the statue and tells him to tell Nico that she's sorry. She goes and is successful at stopping the monster. The others spend a long time after searching for her to no avail, just like the prophecy foretold. One shall be lost in the land without rain. There they were in the desert, and Bianca D'Angelo was gone. They're in shock, and the reader themselves are supposed to be in shock because this is one of the first major deaths that we've seen in person from the point of view of Percy Jackson. This is the first time he's ever witnessed somebody die on a quest. Still in shock, Thalia is the one who takes charge, driving a tow truck for several miles until they meet a dead end at a river canyon. There, Percy covers for Thalia's fear of heights when Grover suggests they take a goat path along the canyon wall. Instead, they go upstream where they find some canoes which they borrow and have the Naiad take the canoes upstream. Along the way, Percy talks with Zoe after she comments how water spirits hold a grudge against her. Percy tells her Bianca's death is not her fault.
It's not your fault. What? It's not your fault. I know. It's not your fault.
But she says it was her fault Bianca went on the quest in the first place. She was hoping Bianca would become the next lieutenant after Zoe, who had been lieutenant for over 2,000 years. Percy pulls out Riptide and says Zoe made it. He asks who the guy in his dream was, and she says, "Don't all you boys want to be just like him?"
What do you mean?
She then goes on to tell Percy she is one of the Hesperides, sisters and daughters of Pleione, who lived in a garden in the west that has a golden apple tree guarded by a dragon, Ladon. She was exiled for helping the hero to trick her father. Their convo is cut short when they arrive at the Hoover Dam and decide to go visit, since it was one of Annabeth's favorite places. Thalia says she's been there before to see the guardian statues. They're sacred to Zeus and a gift from Athena. Percy hears Bessie and has the others go on ahead while he checks on her. She tries warning him, but he doesn't speak cow. That's when Percy spots the skeletal warriors and runs to tell the others. He gets turned around inside and winds up in the turbines with the tour group. The tour guide gives him some advice. "And young man," the tour guide called. I looked back. She'd taken off her glasses. Her eyes were startlingly gray, like storm clouds. "There is always a way out for those clever enough to find it." Pretty sure that was Athena because Annabeth has gray eyes, for one, and B, because Athena would probably show up in places that are architecturally significant, so it makes sense. The gods can be strange when they choose to help. The location, the sun, the stars, the moon, everything has to be in the right order for them to help. Percy nearly slices a girl when he's startled, but thankfully she's mortal. Yet she can see his riptide for what it is, a sword. She introduces herself as Rachel Elizabeth Dare. She helps Percy hide in the bathroom to avoid the skeletons, which Rachel can also see through the mist. Percy gives her his name and runs off, thanking her. He finds the others just sitting down in the cafeteria and tells them they gotta go. Grover starts a food fight to distract the warriors as they run outside to the angel guardian statues. Percy gets the idea for Thalia to pray to Zeus, and she does. Immediately, the angels come to life and defend the heroes. Then they fly them away from the danger and out over the Sierra Nevada. Thalia is terrified by the experience, but they do reach San Francisco in only a few hours. Percy tells Thalia about Rachel Elizabeth Dare, and Thalia tells him about how some mortals are just like that. They can see through the mist, like Sally Jackson, Percy's mom. They have the statues drop them off at the Embarcadero building. From there, they head to the ferry dock to search for Nereus. Percy finds him by his stench, and he immediately grabs the old man. They wrestle for a while before Nereus admits defeat. The others gather around as Percy asks what the mystery monster that can destroy Olympus is. He tells them it's the cow serpent Bessie that has been following Percy across America. Grover says it's the Ophiuchus, and he's a boy. Zoe says if it were to be sacrificed, it can give one the power to destroy the gods. Then, Dr. Thorne shows up, trying to tempt Thalia to kill Bessie right there. He is accompanied by the mortal mercenaries from DC. Percy is able to sneakily send an iris message again to Dionysus. Percy reluctantly asks the wine god for help, and he does. He drives the mortal guards to madness and entangles the manticore in vines until he bursts into monster dust. Before leaving them to their quest, Mr. D tells them that Zoe knows where they need to go, but they must enter at sunset. Zoe says she must go home, to the Garden of the Hesperides. Zoe explains that her sisters are the nymphs of the sunset, so the garden can only be accessed between night and day. Grover suggests taking the Ophiuchus back to Camp Half-Blood, and Percy prays to his dad for safe passage for them and gives up the Nemean lion coat as an offering. He also realizes who the hero that Zoe helped was. I glanced at Zoe, who was watching me carefully. I realized I did know who Zoe's hero had been, the one who'd ruined her life, gotten her kicked out of her family, and never even mentioned how she'd helped him. Hercules, a hero I'd admired all my life. If I'm going to survive, I said, it won't be because I've got a lion-skin cloak. I'm not Hercules. Thalia takes Zoe and Percy to meet Annabeth's dad, Professor Chase, as well as her stepmother and her stepbrothers. There, they're able to convince him to let them borrow his car, and Mrs. Chase asks Percy a favor. Percy, Mrs. Chase called as I was leaving. Tell Annabeth. Tell her she still has a home here, will you? Remind her of that. They make it to Mount Tamalpais when Thalia orders for Zoe to stop the car and everyone to get out. Lightning strikes the car and it explodes. Thalia is horrified, recounting the prophecy, and one shall perish by a parent's hand. Percy tries making her feel better, claiming it must have been someone else. It couldn't have been Zeus. I think it really was Zeus, in a moment of temptation to stop the great prophecy from happening. Did I mention the gods can be petty? Zoe leads them along the mountain through a fog bank into the garden, where a golden apple tree is guarded by the many-headed dragon Ladon. Zoe tries distracting it so Percy and Zoe can go around. They almost make it, but then Ladon lunges at Zoe. She avoids two of his heads, but another strikes her. Thalia uses her shield to distract the dragon so Zoe can run past. They all head towards the summit together. Zoe comments that the ruins of Mount Othrys are new. Mount Othrys was a Titan's home base back in ancient Greece, like how Olympus is for the gods. What are the chances of appearing exactly there, where Atlas holds up the sky?
Coincidence? I think not!
Or where he used to, as now Artemis is chained up, holding up the sky. Percy learns that Luke is there along with the general of the Titan army, Atlas, father of Zoe Nightshade. Percy sees Annabeth, who has a new gray streak in her blonde hair, a result of holding up the burden of the sky, Thalia explains. Luke tries tempting Thalia once again to join them and to sacrifice the Ophiuchus. All she has to do is summon it and it will come. But she doesn't give in, and together her, Zoe, and Percy charge into battle. Thalia engages Luke while Percy goes after Atlas. But in the middle of the battle, Ares' curse from 2 years ago comes back, and his sword fails him. Atlas has the upper hand until Percy takes the burden of the sky from Artemis and frees her. This gives her the chance to fight Atlas herself. While it seems Atlas is about to strike her down, Zoe intervenes, but is quickly swept aside by her father's javelin, sending her flying into rubble. Percy can only watch in horror. But as Atlas goes to bring down his javelin, Artemis shoves him back towards Percy. He's knocked aside by the Titan, who reacts and catches the sky, regaining his burden once again. Thalia backs Luke up to the cliff edge, her spear at his throat. Annabeth calls for Thalia to show mercy to bring Luke back to Olympus. Then Luke reaches for the spear, and Thalia instinctively knocks the son of Hermes away, pushing him over the edge. The other demigods rush to see his crumpled form 50 feet below, unmoving. As the rest of Kronos' army approaches, Artemis carries the dying form of Zoe, slowly succumbing to Ladon's poison. Then, from the sky comes Dr. Chase in a Sopwith camel biplane, shooting celestial bronze bullets at the approaching army. This gives Artemis a chance to call her deer-drawn chariot to get them out of there, with Dr. Chase following behind like an honor guard. They land at Chrissy Field, where Artemis tries healing Zoe, but it's no use. The prophecy had come true. Zoe was killed by her father in the end. As she perishes, she can finally see the stars.
A brave man going in the line of duty like that. Why?
Artemis then puts her spirit in the stars as a new constellation, the Huntress.
They're tearing me apart!
Everyone says goodbye. Artemis goes straight to Olympus. Annabeth and her father have a heart-to-heart, where Dr. Chase reminding her that she has a home in San Francisco. Then Blackjack and 2 other Pegasi come flying out the sky to give the demigods a lift. Thalia falls asleep on the flight, too exhausted to be scared. Annabeth tells Percy that Luke is still alive.
You can't keep getting away with this!
The Pegasi drop them off on Mount Olympus in front of the Hall of the Gods. They walk inside to find the Winter Solstice Council is underway, and Grover and Bessie are there. Artemis intervenes on their behalf to try and convince the gods to not only act to stop Kronos and his minions, but to allow Percy and Thalia to live. Some of the gods want to smite them right there because they pose a danger as children of the Big Three. Percy convinces the gods to let Bessie live, despite the risk. Thalia is offered the chance to join the Hunters of Artemis, which she accepts, becoming the next lieutenant and refusing to ever reach the age of 16. Poseidon chimes in to support Percy, vouching for his loyalty to the gods. And with that, the Olympians party. I find it funny that Poseidon vouched for Percy because it's like he's only doing so that they can ensure that he will be on their side in the end. During the party, Poseidon talks to Percy, telling him that Luke is in fact alive.
You can't keep getting away with this!
Then Athena has a chat with him, explaining his fatal flaw to him. Athena looked almost sorry for me. Kronos knows your flaw, even if you do not. He knows how to study his enemies. Think, Percy, how has he manipulated you? First, your mother was taken from you. Then your best friend Grover. Now my daughter Annabeth. She paused, disapproving. In each case, your loved ones have been used to lure you into Kronos' trap. Your fatal flaw is personal loyalty, Percy. You do not know when it is time to cut your losses. To save a friend, you would sacrifice the world. In a hero of the prophecy, that is very, very dangerous. Then Annabeth comes up and her and Percy dance together. Percy sends an iris message to Tyson, who says he will visit next summer, and then he sends one to Sally, who Percy is happy to see, is happy with Paul Blowfist. Annabeth, Grover, and Percy are picked up by Argus and driven back to camp. There they meet with the other cabin leaders. Even Clarice is back from her secret mission with bad news. Chiron explains that Kronos' first strike will be Camp Half-Blood, because heroes are tools of the gods after all. They're interrupted by Nico, wanting to know where his sister is. Percy goes outside with him to talk. He tries explaining how Bianca sacrificed herself to save them, and how he did everything he could. He even tries giving him the statue that Bianca had taken from the junkyard of the gods, but Nico doesn't believe him, shouting about how his dreams were right, and throwing the statue. He can feel that Bianca is dead, being evaluated by the judges in the underworld. Just then, 4 skeletal warriors appear, and Percy tries to defend Nico, but Nico yells and the earth opens up and swallows the warriors, leaving a scar in the ground of the dining pavilion as the only sign. Nico runs off. Percy tries following but trips on the statue. As he picks it up, he realizes it's a statue of Hades, Lord of the Dead. When he finds Grover and Annabeth, he tells them no one can know that Nico is the son of Hades. Hades didn't break the oath though. Nico and Bianca were born before World War II, when the oath was made. When Annabeth brings up the prophecy, Percy says he chooses to be the child of the prophecy, refusing to allow Nico to have to suffer anymore. They tell Chiron, excluding some details, and he says something wildly out of pocket. So young, Chiron sighed, his hands on the rail of the front porch. Alas, I hope he was eaten by monsters. Much better than being recruited into the Titans' army. Like, hello? Why would you say that? You're supposed to be protecting these kids? Anyway, Kieran and Annabeth agree Luke and Kronos' army won't attack until the next summer at least. Annabeth says she will try San Francisco. She can keep an eye on Mount Tam from there at least. Then Grover bursts in, saying that the god Pan spoke to him. Just 3 words. I await you. The gods are really willing to say or do whatever to serve their own interests, including putting their own children at risk. Like, I find it funny Athena was all too willing to off Percy for the risk he posed, but not Annabeth, who was sympathetic towards Luke. Honey, your bias is showing. I also like how Percy truly answers the call to action in this book. He chooses to be the child of the prophecy, taking that burden upon himself, like he took up the burden of carrying the sky on his shoulders. I also like the way Percy is slowly amassing allies as we get this war and eventual final battle underway. The party ponies, Thalia and the Hunters, Clarice. One can even argue that he already started getting on Hades' good side. Truly, the power of friendship. That's all I have to say for now. I'll catch you all in the next one when we recount the event of the Battle of the Labyrinth. Please leave a like, comment your thoughts and feelings below, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Bye!
Bye!